Ilana, I'm so excited to have you here. It was such a fun time in Zulu, seeing you facilitate and make that space so special. You've just been like a master of community and ops and bringing things together. But also, deeply in this path of like Tantra and movement and spirituality, and like witnessing you facilitate these women's circles during Zuzalu really opened my eyes to how multidimensional we can all be, and really the work that I think is where your heart is, which is really like leading people on this path to like feeling and exploring like deeper levels of consciousness. So I'm so excited to chat with you today about this journey of how you balance these two dual worlds and just share your story. So before we get started, I'd love, where are you calling in from today, and what is your main focus these days?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Always excited to talk about how to bridge this gap between this like kind of world that we're programmed to live and then this other whole world. I'm calling in from Austin, where I live. Yeah, and right now I'm working on, as usual, a few different things. One of them is supporting a company in the Web3 space called Co-Create, but also forever and always practicing and studying Tantra, humans and relationships, and then just general community building. And I really place an emphasis on the things that I think about on a lot of women's work.
I love that. And so like you've had this really deep professional career that's been deeply in like sales and accounts and like extremely professional, from Stella Connect to Frontline Foods to Seven Rooms, advisor to Alpaca, and Self Book, and then like you mentioned, Co-Create. But customer success has been a big part of your life. And then at the same time, there's this parallel world that you've been exploring around like women's work. What does that look like for you? How do those two worlds intersect? And like, how did you even begin to maybe move into this direction of exploring like women's work, movement, Tantra, while also like balancing this other life and like customer success? How does that look?
Yeah, it's I don't know that I do the best job of integrating the two worlds together, but the journey was an interesting one. I worked at New York City tech startups for basically my entire career. Before COVID, I was running client success at a company called Seven Rooms, grew the business from basically 0 to 30 million a year. So was definitely like a hard hitter, wake up, go to work. And that was my life, running a customer success team. And then when COVID hit, I was traveling with my now husband, and eventually we decided to both leave everything that we were working on at home after also starting this big nonprofit, also focused in the hospitality space. And we got to Bali. And upon arrival in Bali, I, was still fully in the zone of wearing mostly black and, living around my goals and accomplishments. And I was looking around and I saw all these women that felt like they were just in their flow and in their feminine and listening to their intuition. And I was like, oh, that's so not me. I will never be that. I will never move with such grace the way that these women do. And then after being there, we were there for a total of 7 months. But after being there for a couple of weeks, I realized that there's actually coaches that work with you to support the idea of embodiment and how to oscillate between the masculine and feminine. Because what I didn't realize is I was living in a very masculine mindset, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful way to live and it's an amazing way to get shit done, but it doesn't necessarily enable you to be in your flow and really embodied and connected to self. And so I started working with some coaches, and I actually interviewed a bunch of coaches until I found one that I loved. And then I started working with her, Chantel Raven, for quite a while throughout my time in Bali. And then when I got back, I continued to work with her, and now I'm practicing as a practitioner. And yeah, it's been a really amazing journey. And, now that I'm back kind of in we'll call it the tech workforce, I think that the way that I integrate it is actually quite subconscious. It shows in the way that I communicate with people that I work with people that I support, and just in the ways that I communicate. And with some of the other projects that I've worked on, like Zuzulu, there was people were living together. Like there was a real need for people to learn how to communicate with one another, and be conscious of their behaviors. And so I think that one of the ways you get to that is by creating community and creating connection. And so I started hosting at the very beginning a weekly women's circle to enable women to be able to express how they feel and feel safe around other women so that they can continue to feel and express. And it's like this cycle of feeling a level of safety so that you can be yourself and continue to learn and expand and grow in whatever it is that you're doing.
Having personally been part of many of those circles that you facilitated, it was mind-blowing to watch the emotional connections and transformations that were happening, because there was so many people from different cultures, backgrounds, experiences that may not have ever even witnessed like what that could look like to have a container to express and communicate. For people who may not be even aware of what a women's circle is, could you give just a little bit of a blurb of what that looks like, and maybe like some of the questions? I really love, maybe we can even share that in the notes, like the key guiding questions that you would sometimes facilitate. And I know you would, massage them and adjust them based on the people in the room, but I think that would be interesting if you just share, like, what does that look like? What are the kind of principles?
Yeah, sure. So a woman's circle is a million different things, but I think the premise of it is providing a safe space for, in this case, women, to explore and express their emotions. I think, I live in a world that I'm surrounded by incredible women who are very conscious and aware and professional and brilliant and expansive, but not everybody does. And not everybody feels like they have a space to actually feel. And feeling is important. Feeling enables you to learn and grow. And so what a women's circle is for me is just creating that space. And so the way that I always start women's circles is by going through a set of guidelines. And I'm happy to share these, but, and they're all written down, but off memory, it's like, first of all, confidentiality. Whatever you say in this space is completely safe. Nobody will repeat any of your stories or your experiences outside of the circle. And that's like one of 7 guidelines. And at the end of all of the guidelines, everybody says like, yes, I agree. Another one is like no judgments. So people can feel free to express whatever it is they're going through and whatever feelings they're having without fear of being judged on that experience or that emotion. And so we go through first these guidelines. And so many people have heard them before if they've been to multiple women's circles, and we still go through them, even if there's no new people. I think it's so important to make sure that people are reminded that this is a safe space. And then a lot of times we'll go through some different prompts. So one, we go around and we each say like a word that we're feeling, right? Like I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling nervous. A lot of women on their first women's circle, they're like, I'm nervous. And that's great. And that just like opens the door for them to actually feel without judgment. And then they feel that they are nervous, and everybody's so with that and so loving of that nervousness. A lot of times we do a rose, a bud, and a thorn. So a rose is something that's amazing going on in your life, that you want to like brag about, or that you want to share, or that you want to love. A bud is something that's budding or blooming, or an opportunity that you feel is ahead of you. And a thorn is something that's challenging in your life. And as you would expect, the more comfortable people feel, the more they spend time on their thorn. People don't really get to talk about the challenges a lot. But also it's important to spend time on the rose. We also don't, I know for myself, like I don't necessarily appreciate all the amazing things in my life all the time, unless I'm really conscious of it or like hyper aware of it. I'm like, wow, I really need to, I need to appreciate this moment. I need to appreciate this thing that's happening to me. So being around other women supporting that thing or supporting you through this challenge is just so powerful. And you've seen it and I've seen it countless times, just the expansion that people feel once they speak and they let something off their shoulders, and people are just holding them in that. and not judging them and not trying to fix them. It's just so beautiful to experience that transformation.
So special. One of the like recent things that came up when I was discussing women's circles, because I've also facilitated a few in LA and in New York. But one of the attendees was mentioning, like, sometimes these women's circles can be so focused on what's not going well. How do you manage that energy so that there's like still this like aspect of witnessing, but then making sure that these circles don't become like almost difficult to bear, like energetically difficult to continue to go to, because like maybe you're feeling like the emphasis is continuously on things that are like maybe not going wrong, or the anxieties in your life rather than like also the wins. Is there some way you've managed to facilitate and see that work well?
Yeah, so first of all, everybody has a timer, and we really hold true to that timer. And the timer is important for an individual, but it's also important for the group and for the literal amount of time that you have on that night, because it could last for hours if you let people just ride. And so depending on how many people, I divide the number of people by the minutes that we have, and then I shorten it a little bit. And so like quite literally you time people. But also one of the things is like making sure that at the end, I also leave time in between. So once somebody completes their rose, bud, and thorn, for example, people have the opportunity to talk to them or ask them questions, or just like let them experience that emotion or that feeling deeper. And so from there, at a certain point, I literally just do cut it off. I also offer people coaching sessions separately. So if people are going into a whirlwind of like this trauma or this thorn so deeply, I'm like, hey, like, we definitely want to give respect to all the other women in the circle to be able to talk about their own challenges or their own things that they're excited about. Let's talk offline. Like, let's bring this, like, I would love to, give you an hour of my time to really feel into this challenge that you're facing. And it kind of just deflects the whole group from having to experience it for the entire time, which could easily happen. And sometimes people want to dig into it. Sometimes people are like, oh, like, no, she really needs support. Like, let's help her. But as the person who's running the women's circle, you kind of just you got to like cut it off at some point. And it is really with respect to the other people in the room and holding boundaries. And me saying like, hey, we're going to stop and move on to the next person now. It just allows everybody else to experience what it's like for somebody else to have boundaries. And so that in and of itself is good practice. Like seeing other people have boundaries is supportive of yourself, allowing yourself to have your own boundaries as well.
I love that when you also described that many times when people are experiencing an emotion, that you experiencing that emotion and being seen in that emotion actually gives other people permission to feel the things that they're feeling, and like, be a light, a guiding light to others. I would love to dive into, so you spend this time in Bali, you do this transition in sort of more this like masculine way, and you have some really great coaches guiding you on this path to the feminine. What was your path into Tantra, and like, what does Tantra mean to you? Because I think when we hear that in sometimes North America, it's just been focused primarily on sex, which I know you have a really beautiful perspective that like, actually, it's not about sex, really. It's a completely different thing. What is Tantra, and how did you find that practice?
Yeah. I actually found Tantra through like sex, kind of, but it's not sex at all. The way that I kind of stepped into Tantra was when Joel and I, my husband and I, got to Bali. We were like, oh, there's all these intimacy coaches and relationship coaches. Like, we're here. Let's work on ourselves. Let's work on our relationship. We've been together now for a couple of years, and, things have changed, obviously. And as they do in relationships, and not running away from that change and actually embracing that was something that we figured, hey, while we're here, let's work on that. And so through interviewing all these different coaches, I found somebody who I just really resonated with, who was a Tantra coach. And we ended up signing up for a 4-day private one-on-one immersion or 2-on-2 immersion, where it was this couple and us in a villa, and we studied Tantra, we learned about Tantra, we practiced it, and it was amazing. And it kind of was the opening to the world of Tantra. So Tantra is really like an esoteric tradition. It's like there's so many different definitions about it, and it's not sex. It's just it doesn't disclude sex. So it's breath, it's sound, it's movement, it's life. Like it is all that life is. It's the ups and downs and the emotion across a wide spectrum. So the positive emotions, the emotions that many people deem as negative or less desirable emotions. It's the accepting and working with emotions and experiences. And in Tantra, there's this idea that there's no such thing as a negative emotion. A negative emotion is only that of which you resist. So by resisting emotions, by resisting things like sadness or fear or jealousy, instead of resisting them, you address them and love them and work with them, you can kind of achieve this great expansion of life that I think we all want, or that I definitely wanted. So yeah, the more you allow yourself to feel the emotions that either like voluntarily or subconsciously that we hide from, the more you can feel the emotions that we commonly enjoy, like love and excitement and ecstasy. And so, yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. And so I did get into it through the idea of like, let's improve our sex life and let's improve our communication and our relationship. And what I learned is that Tantra just includes sex because it doesn't push anything away. It doesn't push away, any sort of emotion that is suppressed or taboo. The more you push things away, like that which you resist persists. And people resist the idea of sex. They resist the idea of sexual healing. And it's not all that. And actually in tantric practices, sex is only mentioned, I think, like in 8% of the ideas of Tantra. It's like a very small percentage. Tantra really is about life and expansion.
One of the exercises that you did share with the group, which I really appreciated, was this idea of visualizing your feelings or emotions as colors and like acknowledging them and being with them and sitting with them in that way and making it very approachable. And I think it's been really beautiful to witness the different modalities and things you've brought into communities and life. And so I'm curious if there are any specific individuals or projects, companies that you follow, even modalities, that you think are really inspiring or you would suggest others follow as well.
Yeah, for sure. I personally think my Tantra teacher is one of the best in the world, which is why I work with her, even though she lives in Australia. Her name is Chantel Raven. She started Embodied Awakening Academy. I highly recommend following her work on Instagram, her blogs. She just really balances the spirituality of it and also the pragmatism of living life. Some other projects that I really love are, if you've heard of Layla Martin, so she has a course that enables people to become sex, love, and intimacy coaches. And I think that one of the things I'm really passionate about is bridging the gap and eliminating the stigma around talking about these things, around talking about the challenges that every single one of us has in some capacity. The only people who don't have these problems are the people who just resist the problems and resist to admit that they actually have the problems. Like everybody faces challenges in their relationship. Everybody has parental trauma and sibling trauma and elementary school friend trauma. There's nobody in the world who doesn't have those things. And so resisting them and pretending like they don't exist doesn't do anybody any good. So Layla's actually created a course for people to become coaches. And so I think it's just like opening up this world of this whole new world of coaches. For better or for worse, anybody can become one, but it is helping people to dive a little bit deeper into the thing that they care about and that they want to support people on. Another project is called Comma Lab. It's educational videos and some like workshops around communication, relationship. And I love Chloe McIntosh. I think she's amazing. Like, I just have always been inspired by her from the day I first saw her on Instagram, and have followed her ever since. Also some other work that's like not necessarily Tantra at all, but has a lot of shared modalities is Dick Schwartz, IFS, like internal family systems. I think it's just brilliant. And that's actually more so where I get the colors from, like separating yourself from your emotion. You don't have to be your emotion. Like, I'm not sad, I have sadness, or there's a part of me that's sad, separates the identity of being an emotion from like, there's just something about what's happening right now that is sad. And I can address that much easier if I'm not the thing that is sad. So I think IFS is truly incredible. Yeah, and then some of the other people in the sexual wellness space, like Alexandra Fine from Dame, like just removing the stigma around all this stuff. Like, everyone has sex. Everyone thinks about sex. Everybody wants sex. Everybody wants it to be good and comfortable and be able to communicate around it. And again, while it's not all sex, that is really important for me. Like, it is really important for people to be able to communicate with their friends and their partners about sex, and not suppress it so deeply the way that we have in our society.
I also really liked, what was the intimacy archetype thing that you shared? I thought that was also a really cool communication tool with people and partners.
The erotic blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love erotic blueprint. That's Jaya, Miss Jaya. Yeah, she created, and again, there's so many frameworks. Like, people think this stuff is total rocket science, and it's not. There's a million frameworks that actually are designed to help everyday people solve problems and dig into their own challenges and why they are the way they are. It's like love languages, but for sex. So it's called erotic blueprints. And there's a quiz, and you pay like sub $20 for the results. And you can see like what your erotic blueprint is, why you like the things you like, why you don't like the things that you don't like and that your partner likes, but you're like, I don't like that, but are we compatible? And so many people are challenged in that stuff, but like, there's actually just frameworks that help you answer all of these questions. So it's awesome. It's awesome that there's so much content out there. We just have to get this stuff out there more and get people talking about it more. And one of the reasons why I'm so open about the challenges that I've had in my life is because once I open up to people, they're like, oh, I also have that same challenge, or I have something similar. And then they'll talk about it and they realize once they talk about it, it's so much easier to solve.
What advice do you give for someone who's not in Bali, isn't surrounded by a plethora of coaches and resources, if they're getting started on maybe tapping in more to their feminine and some of this like honesty, vulnerability, fluidity, ability to be in that state of receptivity that is basically a prerequisite to what you're describing?
Yeah, I think first of all, there are so many coaches out there. I also started a company called Guided by Woo. It's guidedbywoo.com. And the purpose of that is really to help people find the right coach or workshop for whatever it is they're looking for, whatever they're feeling challenged by. If they want to be able to step into their feminine more, or they want to fix the communication with their partner, or whatever it is, I help them to find the right coach or the right workshop. There's so many out there. And what I would say is like, start following them on Instagram, start tracking different coaches, like who they are, what kind of message resonates with you. There's so much content and so many workshops out there that I would highly recommend, either reaching out to me and I could recommend a few for something that, you want to work on, or just like starting to get acquainted with some of these coaches and watching their stories, watching their like everyday life. And you can see which ones are very produced versus the ones that are pretty natural. And to be honest, the ones that are pretty natural and their messaging just resonates with you, even though it might not look as professional, I would venture to say they are probably the better coach for you than the ones who are super buttoned up and have a big content team behind them. Yeah, and yeah, like reading different articles, but also just taking it slow and doing the work and like not pressuring yourself into like, you know, doing things that cause vulnerability hangovers. And yeah, there's so much amazing content out there, and it's really just a matter of what you're looking for.
I would love that. And with that, I'd love to also know what's the best way of staying in touch with you personally, especially as you evolve the way you're showing up in this space, both professionally and otherwise, and sharing your stories. And then also anything else that you think would be good to follow in terms of like Guided by Woo as a resource. How can we keep in touch with you?
Yeah, you can always reach out on Ilana at guidedbywoo.com. Also, you can go to ilanawish.com, which has any way to get in touch with me, and it's ILANA, unlike you, which is ALANA. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me and kind of see what I'm writing, what I'm reading. LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm easily findable. I don't think of myself as very exclusive, so reach out anytime.
I will definitely be following along. I already am. And we will link all of those things in the notes for others, and also the guiding principles, the 7 principles from Women's Circle and some of the prompts you mentioned. So those will all be here, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks so much for everything that you're sharing and the balancing of this duality of life and the professional, and then also this like really real, true aspect of what it means to be human. I so appreciate you, and thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.